He sat his ex-wife at the back to shame her, but she arrived in a Bentley with triplets. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. You really thought she'd sit at the back? The words dropped like a slap across the air, sharp enough to turn every head in the ballroom. Chandeliers glittered, violins murmured, and in the middle of all that glamour, a black woman stood still at the entrance, calm, unreadable, wrapped in silence that made people whisper. At the front table, her ex-husband adjusted his cufflinks, lips curling in quiet satisfaction. He'd planned this, a seating chart meant to humiliate her, to remind her where she used to belong, behind him. But what no one knew yet was that she hadn't come alone, and the sound waiting outside, low, polished, powerful, wasn't thunder. It was a Bentley. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The night had the kind of beauty that pretends to be peace candles flickering, glasses catching the light, but beneath it all was tension disguised as etiquette. He, Malcolm Reed, had orchestrated everything. A charity gala for his new company, his new image, his new fiancée, all gleaming, rehearsed, curated. And somewhere in the back, printed in small letters on the seating chart, her name, Dr. Ava Collins. He didn't expect her to show up. He just wanted to see if she'd noticed the insult. She noticed. Every guest turned when the doors opened, and the hum of conversation fractured. Ava walked in slow, deliberate, her stride steady as a verdict. 3 small faces peeked from behind her triplets, dressed in cream, holding her hands. The Bentley outside purred quietly like a statement. She wasn't late. She was right on time. The hostess faltered, voice low. "Miss Collins, your seat is—" "I know," Ava replied softly, eyes fixed on the man who used to share her last name. He froze. The smile that had sold investors and cameras alike began to falter. He rose halfway, unsure whether to greet her or defend himself. The whispers began immediately. "That's his ex-wife? She's here? With kids?" Someone near the stage whispered. "Those are his?" The rumor spread like static. Ava didn't flinch. The light caught her face, not through jewelry or gowns, but through composure. She didn't come to reclaim him, she came to reclaim her narrative. And as she crossed the room, every step rewrote the story he'd told about her. Her silence said what words couldn't. "You tried to shame me, but I built something stronger than your pride." And when the maitre reached to guide her toward the back table, she stopped him with a calm gesture. "I'll take the front," she said, voice soft but final, "since that's where my name helped build this event." The entire ballroom went still. Even the violins hesitated. Malcolm's jaw tightened, but she didn't look at him again. She turned toward the triplets, smiled faintly, and said, "Come on, babies. We sit where we're meant to be." And as she did, the Bentley outside kept its engine running, a quiet reminder that she never needed permission to arrive in power. Malcolm's jaw tightened as Ava took her seat at the front. Every eye in the ballroom followed her movement. It was not loud, but it was seismic. The air changed. Guests who once whispered in admiration of Malcolm's new fiancée now whispered something else entirely. The maitre d', unsure of what to do, froze mid-step. Malcolm forced a smile that looked more like strain than charm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice cracking slightly through the microphone, "thank you all for coming to support the Reed Foundation." He said it like the night was still his, but everyone could feel the balance had shifted. Ava sat calmly with her children, their little hands resting on the white linen tablecloth, innocent, unaware that they had just turned a power game into history. The new fiancée, Claire, a slender woman in a sequin dress that caught too much light, leaned toward Malcolm and whispered, "Is that her?" He nodded once, jaw stiff. "She was not supposed to be here," he muttered. Claire's eyes flicked toward Ava with quiet envy. "She does not look like much." But Ava heard it. Her head turned slightly, her gaze cool, cutting through the noise like glass through silk. She had heard that tone before years ago, when she walked into a boardroom filled with men who thought they were smarter, whiter, and therefore right. Back then, she smiled too, but it was the kind of smile that hid strategy. Tonight was no different. A server approached nervously, holding a tray of champagne flutes. "Ma'am, would you prefer the children sit elsewhere?" he asked quietly, clearly repeating an order whispered from the head table. Ava looked at him without anger, only certainty. "No, they stay with me," she said, her voice low, firm, final. The waiter nodded quickly and disappeared into the sea of murmuring suits. Malcolm lifted his glass. "To new beginnings," he said into the mic, trying to claim the moment again. A few guests clapped. Others hesitated. Ava raised her glass, not to him, but to the air above him. "And to remembering what you built before you forgot who helped you build it." The words cut clean and deep. A small gasp escaped the room. Even the violinist stopped mid-bow. Claire's expression froze into something between panic and pride. Malcolm chuckled awkwardly. Always the dramatic one. Ava's calm never cracked. "No, Malcolm, just accurate." Her tone was quiet but absolute, the kind of control that came from surviving public humiliation before and learning to weaponize silence. Flashbulbs went off at the far end of the room. Someone was filming. Ava did not care. She looked at the crowd and smiled. "I am here to celebrate too. The success, the charity, the future, all of it has my name on the paperwork somewhere, I am sure." The audience laughed nervously, not sure whether to admire or retreat. The triplets giggled softly, breaking the tension, their joy pure and disarming. It reminded everyone how far the night had drifted from its polished beginning. A woman at a nearby table leaned toward another guest and whispered, "She built his first company. Did you know that?" "No," the other replied, eyes wide. He never mentioned her. Ava heard that too. It did not hurt anymore. It confirmed what she already knew. He had erased her in his story long ago. But tonight, she had written herself back in ink. Malcolm tried again. "Let us move on, shall we?" He gestured to the stage. The lights dimmed, but as the music swelled, Ava's phone buzzed once. A message flashed. Asterisk protocol ready. Asterisk. She did not react outwardly, but inside, everything aligned. The calm before justice had just begun. Ava placed her phone face down beside the crystal glass and glanced across the ballroom as the presentation lights flickered. The giant screen behind Malcolm displayed photos of charity missions and corporate logos, all bearing the Reed Foundation insignia, an empire she had helped him build from scratch before he decided she no longer looked the part. Her pulse stayed calm, steady, almost detached. She was not there for revenge, she was there for truth. The triplets played quietly with the ribbons tied around their napkins, unaware that their mother's calm was the sharpest form of protest. From the stage, Malcolm spoke in that confident, media-polished tone that had once charmed investors and journalists alike. "We believe in legacy," he said, gesturing toward the screen. "We believe in family, in strength, in vision." Ava's eyes narrowed slightly. The irony was almost poetic. The very values he stole from her were now printed behind him in bold gold letters. Claire sat beside him, glowing under the spotlight, nodding as if she understood a single line of the script. Ava took a slow sip of water, and that small, measured act drew more attention than the speech itself. People watched her now, waiting for her next move. At the back of the room, a young black woman in a navy suit, Ava's assistant, Mia, stood quietly, phone in hand. She nodded once toward Ava from across the tables. The signal was clear. It was time. Ava leaned toward her eldest child and whispered something soft. The little girl nodded and smiled, innocent but understanding that her mother's silence carried power. The host on stage introduced the board members one by one, calling out their titles and fake accolades. Ava waited until she heard her own name omitted. The omission landed heavy. The audience sensed it. She rose slowly. The chair legs brushed the marble floor like a warning. Conversations faded. Cameras shifted. "Excuse me," she said, her voice smooth, echoing just enough. "I believe there is an error on that screen." Malcolm froze. The host blinked. "Pardon?" Ava walked closer to the stage, heels clicking with deliberate rhythm. "You mentioned the founding team," she continued, her tone calm but firm. "But you skipped one name. Mine." A murmur rippled across the crowd. The host looked helplessly toward Malcolm, who forced a laugh. "Ava, this is not the time." "No, Malcolm," she interrupted, her gaze steady. "It is exactly the time, because truth always arrives on schedule. even when people rewrite the program. Someone near the stage whispered, "She is the co-founder?" Another guest whispered back, "He said she left years ago." Ava smiled faintly. "I did not leave. I was replaced." The room fell silent. She turned toward the audience. "I walked away with nothing but my dignity, and that turned out to be worth more than every company share you tried to hide." Malcolm took a step forward, microphone trembling slightly in his hand. "This is absurd. Security. Stand down," Ava said before he could finish, and for a reason no one could explain, they obeyed. Mia stepped forward from the back of the room, tapping her earpiece. "Protocol 1 is active, Dr. Collins," she said clearly. The lights dimmed for a moment, then the screens flickered. The company logo was replaced by archived footage, an old interview from years ago. On screen, a younger Ava stood beside Malcolm, both smiling before cameras. "We built this together," she said in the video. 50, 50, always. Gasps spread across the ballroom. The projection froze on her face, her words crystal clear. Malcolm's composure cracked. He turned toward the tech booth. "Turn that off," but the operator shook his head. "The feed is remote-controlled." Ava's voice broke through the silence again. "Do not worry, Malcolm. This is not sabotage. This is history reminding you it still exists." The triplets watched, wide-eyed, as applause began to rise, not loud, but slow, honest, inevitable. Ava lifted her chin, eyes glinting under the chandelier. "I am not here for a seat at your table. I am here to show everyone who built the table in the first place." The applause that had started as a hesitant ripple grew into a wave that filled the ballroom. Malcolm's face tightened. The mask of composure that had carried him through years of deception finally cracked. He slammed the microphone down on the podium, the metallic thud echoing like a gavel. "Enough of this circus," he barked, his voice shaking with anger more than authority. "Turn it off, now." But the feed continued to play, switching to a series of archived contracts, emails, and photographs, each one bearing both their names, Ava Collins and Malcolm Reed, side by side. The guests stared in stunned silence. Every document was proof that the empire he claimed as his own had been born from a partnership he buried. Claire's hands trembled as she whispered, "Malcolm, is this true?" He turned on her sharply. "Not now." Ava stepped closer to the stage, her calm presence cutting through his rage. "Do not blame her, Malcolm. She only believed what you told her. The same story you sold to investors, reporters, and everyone else who needed a hero that looked like you." His jaw tightened, his breathing uneven. "You are embarrassing yourself." Ava shook her head slowly. "No, I am reminding you who you are. That is far worse." Mia walked toward the front of the room, holding a slim tablet. "Dr. Collins," she said clearly, "we have verified the original incorporation records and located the transfer signatures. Everything matches the timestamp from the night he filed the removal papers without your consent." A low gasp swept across the crowd. Malcolm turned pale. "You cannot prove intent," he said quickly, but even he did not sound convinced. Ava's voice stayed soft, deliberate. "Intent was clear when you tried to erase my name from what we built. Tonight, I am putting it back." The large screens behind her changed again. This time, they showed a short video, a montage of old footage from the company's early days. The images were grainy, unpolished, but real. A young Ava stood in a tiny office, sleeves rolled up, whiteboard filled with notes behind her. Malcolm stood beside her, silent, as she explained the company's mission to a room full of skeptical men. "We are building something that does not depend on privilege," she said in the clip. "We are building opportunity." The lights flickered back to the present. Ava faced the audience. "That was the promise," she said. And that promise was broken the moment he decided that success needed a lighter face. The words landed heavy. The racial undertone in her statement pierced through the elegant crowd like a revelation. A few guests lowered their eyes in quiet shame. Others nodded, understanding the truth she had finally spoken aloud. Malcolm stepped off the stage, his voice low, furious. "You think you can humiliate me? This is defamation." Ava met him halfway, her voice low but cutting. "You already humiliated yourself when you used my silence as your cover." The triplets watched from their table, small and still, as their mother stood her ground. Mia handed Ava the tablet. "All files have been sent to the corporate board and the media archive," she said. "They are authenticated and time-stamped." Ava nodded. "Good. Transparency is not a scandal. It is salvation. The guests erupted into quiet murmurs. Someone near the front clapped again, then another, until the sound became steady, unanimous. The truth was no longer a rumor, it was public record. Malcolm turned, scanning the faces of the very people who once applauded him. None met his gaze. Claire rose from her seat, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "You lied to all of us." Ava took the microphone, not to shout, but to end it. "Power built on deceit always collapses under the weight of truth," she said. And tonight, that collapse begins. The ballroom fell silent. Then, one by one, people began to stand not for Malcolm Reed, but for the woman he had tried to erase. The empire was still standing, but its throne had just shifted hands. For a moment, the ballroom seemed suspended in air, every breath caught between disbelief and awakening. The applause faded into a deep, collective silence. Ava stood at the center of it, calm, composed, as if she had expected this exact moment to arrive. Malcolm's face was drained of color. The facade he had spent years perfecting now looked fragile, almost human. He reached for the microphone again, but his hands trembled. "You think this makes you a hero?" he said, his tone somewhere between accusation and desperation. Ava tilted her head slightly, her voice even and precise. "No, Malcolm. It makes me free." The triplets watched her with quiet pride, their small faces mirroring strength far beyond their years. Mia stepped forward once more, tapping on her tablet. "Dr. Collins," she said clearly, "corporate compliance has confirmed the breach. The board of directors is requesting an immediate response from you." A few guests gasped at the formality in Mia's tone. Malcolm looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff with nowhere left to go. "You cannot take this from me," he hissed. Ava turned toward him slowly. "You already took what was mine. I am simply restoring balance." She took the microphone from his shaking hand and faced the crowd again. "For years," she said, her voice carrying over the marble and glass, "I stayed silent because I believed the truth would reveal itself in time. But silence does not protect the honest. It only comforts the guilty." Her words hung heavy, and somewhere in the back, a woman whispered, "Amen." Ava continued, "This company was built on integrity, inclusivity, and purpose. That foundation was cracked when bias and ego replaced partnership and trust. But make no mistake, I am not here to destroy. I am here to rebuild." The screens behind her flickered again, this time showing a live video feed, members of the corporate board joining remotely. One of them, an older man with silver hair, spoke through the speakers. "Dr. Collins," he said, "the evidence is undeniable. The board moves to suspend Mr. Reed effective immediately pending investigation." The room reacted like a wave. Murmurs rose, cameras clicked, reporters whispered into their phones. Malcolm staggered backward, eyes wide. "You cannot do this," he said, almost pleading now. Ava looked at him, not with anger, but with the quiet authority of someone who had earned every ounce of her power. "It was not me," she replied softly. "It was the truth." Claire covered her face, tears falling quietly as the security team approached. "Please," Malcolm whispered to her, but she turned away. "You lied to me, Malcolm," she said. "You lied to everyone." Ava nodded toward the guards. "Escort him out respectfully," she instructed. "Let him leave with what little dignity he has left." They guided him toward the exit, his once confident stride reduced to something hollow. As the doors closed behind him, Ava turned back to the audience. "I am not celebrating his fall," she said. "I am acknowledging the rise of accountability." The crowd responded with genuine applause this time, not out of spectacle, but respect. Mia handed Ava a small earpiece. "The media has gone live," she said. Ava nodded, sliding it on. Her voice deepened, steady and resonant. "Let this moment remind every woman who has ever been erased from her own story," she said, her tone carrying the gravity of truth, "that silence is not grace when injustice wears a suit. Sometimes dignity looks like standing alone." The ballroom erupted again, but Ava did not smile. She only exhaled, slow and steady, the sound of liberation finally realized. The screens faded to black, leaving only her silhouette against the golden light, a woman who had lost everything once, and now owned more than power. She owned peace. The ballroom lights softened as the last echo of applause faded into an almost reverent quiet. Ava remained on stage, her posture tall but unhurried, every movement deliberate. The tension that had defined the night was now replaced with something heavier: recognition. Reporters whispered into microphones. Flashes from cameras painted brief halos of light across her face. But she stayed still, absorbing the moment with the calm certainty of someone who had waited too long for it. The chairman's voice came through the speakers again, steady and formal. Dr. Collins, the board has granted you full interim control of the Reed Foundation pending restructuring. We trust your leadership will restore integrity to our operations. The room erupted into a hum of astonishment. Ava gave a small nod, her voice clear when she replied, "Thank you. The goal is not revenge, it is repair." The board member smiled faintly before the screen went dark. Mia approached from the side, tablet in hand. "Dr. Collins, the media channels are flooding with the footage. You are trending nationwide." Ava gave a quiet sigh. "Let them talk. Let them see what accountability looks like in real time." She turned toward the crowd. Tonight was not about humiliation. It was about truth. Every system we build reflects who we are. If we fill it with arrogance, it rots. But if we fill it with purpose, it lives. The guests hung on every word. Even those who had once doubted her were now standing, hands folded, silent in respect. From the corner of the room, a young reporter raised her hand hesitantly. "Dr. Collins, what happens next?" Ava smiled softly. "Next, we rebuild the company the right way, with transparency, diversity, and equity at its core. And we will do it publicly so no one ever forgets how power must answer to principle." The reporter lowered her hand, visibly moved. Mia whispered something to Ava's ear, and she nodded. "One more thing," Ava said, addressing the room again. "I am reinstating every employee who was terminated or demoted under Mr. Reed's leadership for reasons that had nothing to do with merit. Our first act of reform begins now." The guests broke into applause again, louder this time, not just for her victory, but for the sense of justice that had filled the air. In the middle of it all, the triplets clapped too, their small hands echoing faintly like a promise for the future. Ava bent down briefly, kissed each of their foreheads, and whispered, "You see, babies, truth always finds its voice." As the crowd began to disperse, Claire approached cautiously, her eyes red but her expression sincere. "Ava," she said quietly, "I did not know. I truly did not know what he did to you." Ava studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You were lied to. We all were. What matters is what we do after we learn the truth." Claire took a shaky breath. "What will happen to him?" Ava looked toward the closed doors where Malcolm had been escorted out minutes before. "He will face his consequences, not from me, but from the truth he tried to bury." She paused, then added, "Justice does not require my anger. It already has my evidence." Claire nodded slowly, tears falling again. "I hope you forgive yourself for ever doubting your worth," Ava said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder before turning away. As she walked back toward the main table, cameras followed her every step, but she did not flinch. She had nothing left to hide. Mia joined her, whispering updates about incoming calls from investors and legal counsel. Ava listened, her gaze calm. "Schedule everything for tomorrow," she said. "Tonight, we rest." She looked around the room one last time, at the faces now filled with respect instead of dismissal, and said quietly to herself, "This is not the end. It is the beginning of rebuilding what truth deserves." The chandeliers dimmed as she exited the stage, the sound of her heels marking the rhythm of change. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the Foundation's headquarters, illuminating a space that felt different now, lighter, quieter, and somehow honest. Ava stood by the large conference table, reviewing the overnight reports that Mia had compiled. "Media coverage?" Ava asked. Mia, seated beside her with her tablet, replied, "Every major outlet picked it up. The footage has over 8 million views across platforms. The board released a statement this morning confirming your reinstatement as co-founder and acting CEO." Ava exhaled slowly. "Good. Let them see what rebuilding looks like." She looked out the window toward the city skyline, her reflection blending into the sunlight. "Today we start again, but we do it right this time." Employees began to file into the conference room one by one, people of every background, some nervous, some inspired, all curious. Ava turned to them and smiled gently. "I know the last 24 hours have been unexpected," she said, her voice measured and warm. But transparency starts with truth, so let us begin there. She gestured to the large screen behind her. It displayed 2 words in white letters against a black background. Asterisk, integrity rebuilt. Asterisk. For years, this company operated under the illusion of inclusivity, she continued, while quietly silencing the very voices that made it strong. That ends today. Every decision, every hire, every dollar we spend will reflect the values we claim to stand for. A man at the far end of the table raised his hand hesitantly. Dr. Collins, what about Mr. Reed's projects that are still in motion? Ava looked at him directly, her tone calm but resolute. They will be reviewed for compliance and fairness. If they meet our standards, they continue. If not, they stop. Effective immediately. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. Another woman spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. I just want to say thank you. I worked here 5 years under his management. I watched talented people walk out because they were told they did not fit the image. It is good to finally feel seen. Ava nodded. That is why we are here. This is not about revenge. It is about making sure no one else is erased for someone else's comfort. Mia leaned closer and whispered, the board wants you to address the public at noon. Ava nodded again. We will, but first I want to meet the staff who were wrongfully terminated. She looked around the room. Bring them home. Later that morning, in the lobby below, a group of former employees stood waiting faces, familiar yet distant. As Ava descended the marble staircase, conversations stopped. One of them, a middle-aged black man in a gray suit, stepped forward. Dr. Collins, he said quietly, I was security. I got dismissed for questioning a racially biased policy. Ava approached him, meeting his eyes. Then today, you are reinstated, and tomorrow, you will help me rewrite that policy. The man's voice broke as he nodded, emotion filling his face. Behind him, others followed, each story different but painfully similar. Ava greeted each one with a handshake, a look that said, asterisk, I remember, asterisk. When the last person spoke, she turned to the gathered staff. Every one of you deserves to work in a place that sees you before it judges you. That begins now. Applause filled the lobby, but Ava only smiled faintly. She knew this was only the first step. As Mia handed her a folder labeled Reform Phase 1, Ava took it carefully and said, we rebuild not just for redemption, but for legacy. Because justice without change is just noise. She turned toward the cameras waiting outside and said quietly to Mia, let us show them what leadership looks like when it listens. By noon, the press conference room at the Reed Foundation headquarters was standing room only. Cameras lined every wall, microphones angled toward the sleek podium where Ava Collins was about to speak. The logo behind her had already been changed. The name Reed Foundation was gone. In its place, bold silver letters spelled out Collins Initiative. It was more than a rebranding, it was reclamation. Mia stood at her side, quietly adjusting the teleprompter as journalists murmured among themselves. Are the rumors true? One asked. Is she taking over the entire organization? Another replied, she already has. When Ava stepped to the podium, the room fell silent instantly. Her presence carried gravity, not from spectacle but from truth. Good afternoon, she began, her voice steady but warm. Yesterday, this organization faced a truth that many in our world still refuse to confront. Leadership without accountability is not leadership at all. It is exploitation wrapped in charm. A few reporters shifted, already typing. Ava continued. What you witnessed last night was not a scandal, it was a correction. For too long, credit has been taken from the people who built the very ground others stand on. I was one of those people. And today, I am here to make sure that story never repeats itself for anyone else. Cameras flashed. Her tone remained even, controlled. We are renaming this foundation to honor transparency and equity. The Collins Initiative will focus on 3 pillars: education, opportunity, and justice. Every dollar raised will go toward empowering marginalized entrepreneurs and students who have been told they do not belong. A reporter raised his hand. Dr. Collins, are you saying Mr. Reed's leadership was racially biased? Ava looked at him directly. I am saying his leadership reflected a system that rewards bias and calls it professionalism. We are dismantling that system, starting here. The audience reacted with a low hum of approval. Another question came from a woman in the front row. Dr. Collins, what about the people who enabled him? Will they be held accountable? Ava nodded. Accountability does not end with one man. It is cultural. Every manager, every executive will undergo review. Those who upheld unfair practices will face the same standard. Justice must be systemic, or it is meaningless. The cameras kept flashing as she paused for a breath. I have spent years being called too ambitious, too emotional, too loud, too quiet, too black, too female, too something to be taken seriously. I learned that the problem was never the way I spoke, it was the way they refused to listen, so I built something they could not ignore. The crowd applauded, and for the first time that day, Ava smiled softly. Mia leaned close and whispered, "We just hit every major network." Ava nodded slightly, never breaking her gaze from the cameras. "To every young woman watching this," she said, "especially the ones who have been told to wait their turn, your time does not begin when they allow it. It begins when you decide your voice deserves the room." The room broke into applause that rolled like thunder. Ava stepped back from the podium as Mia whispered updates into her earpiece. "Investors are calling in support. 2 universities already want to partner." Ava's lips curved faintly. "Good," she said. "Let them come. This time we lead with conscience, not convenience." She turned toward the sign behind her, the name gleaming in the light, and for the first time in years, she felt whole. The cameras kept rolling, but she did not speak again. She simply stood there, black, brilliant, and unshakable as the world finally learned that justice, when guided by grace, can look like peace wrapped in power. 3 months later, the Collins Initiative had become a national model for corporate reform. The building that once carried Malcolm Reed's name now buzzed with new energy. The walls displayed photographs of scholarship recipients, small business owners, and community leaders who had risen through programs Ava had designed herself. Morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Ava stood by her office desk reviewing a report. Mia entered with her usual quiet efficiency, a folder tucked under her arm. "Dr. Collins," she said, "the audit team finalized their investigation into the old leadership. They confirmed everything you exposed: fraud, exclusion, manipulation of contracts. The legal team says Mr. Reed has agreed to a public settlement." Ava nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "Let him have his settlement. It is not my job to punish him. It is my job to rebuild what he tried to break." Mia smiled faintly. "And you did. The numbers are better than ever. Donations have tripled. Employees actually stay." Ava turned toward the glass wall where the city skyline shimmered. "Stability is not success," she said softly. "Success is when the people we serve no longer need us to speak for them." Down in the lobby, a group of students waited for her, the first class of Collins scholars, each wearing navy blazers with the initiative's new crest. As Ava stepped into the elevator, she caught her reflection in the mirror, composed, certain, but still carrying the weight of memory. The elevator doors opened to applause. The students stood in a line, eyes bright with hope. A young girl with braids raised her hand shyly. "Dr. Collins," she said, "is it true you once lost everything before you became a CEO?" Ava smiled gently. "Yes, I lost my position, my name, even my peace for a while. But what I learned is that losing everything can sometimes mean finding yourself." The girl nodded slowly as if engraving the words into her heart. Ava continued, "The world will tell you that your value depends on who recognizes it. Do not listen. Build your value so loudly that they cannot look away." The students applauded, and cameras flashed. As she walked them through the building, Ava paused near a wall displaying framed letters from former employees, thank you notes, apologies, and testimonies. One note in particular caught her eye. It was from Claire. It read, **, you taught me that grace does not mean silence. I hope you never stop teaching the world that lesson. **. Ava smiled, then turned to Mia. "How is Claire doing?" Mia replied, "She is managing outreach for one of our new partner firms in Chicago. She says you inspired her to start again." Ava nodded approvingly. "Good. Redemption should multiply, not end." A knock on the glass drew her attention. It was the chairman of the board, accompanied by 2 government officials. "Dr. Collins," he said, "we wanted to personally deliver this." He handed her a framed certificate bearing the presidential seal, "For outstanding leadership in ethical business reform." The applause that followed was warm, genuine. Ava accepted it quietly, her voice calm when she finally spoke. "This honor belongs to every person who refused to stay silent when it was easier to disappear." The camera zoomed in as she raised the certificate slightly. We built this not from anger, but from integrity, and integrity does not age, it evolves. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Ava stood alone in her office, the city lights twinkling beyond the window. The triplets' laughter echoed faintly from the next room where Mia was watching them. Ava closed her eyes, whispered a soft prayer of gratitude, and smiled. "We made it," she said to herself. "But this is not the end. This is the proof." As the night settled, the sign outside glowed against the dark sky times the Collins Initiative, built on truth, asterisk. 6 months later, the Collins Initiative had become more than a company. It had become a movement. Its offices expanded across 3 states, its name spoken in boardrooms that once ignored women who looked like Ava Collins. But with growth came new challenges. Late one evening, Ava sat alone in her office, papers spread across the desk, the hum of the city outside whispering through the glass. She had just finished reviewing a proposal from a major investor, a powerful corporation offering millions in funding but demanding relaxed equity policies in return. Mia entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Long night?" she asked. Ava smiled faintly. "Long decisions." Mia placed a cup beside her. "Do I even want to ask what this one is about?" Ava leaned back, eyes on the skyline. "They want to fund our next expansion but change our hiring criteria. They say diversity goals slow down growth." Mia's expression hardened. "That is not investment. That is control." Ava nodded slowly. "Exactly. Progress without principle is just another form of corruption." She stood, walking toward the window. "I spent years watching men in power trade ethics for applause. I will not do it." The door opened again. It was one of the board members, Daniel Chen, a pragmatic executive who had supported Ava from the start. "Ava," he said cautiously, "that deal could double our funding. We could open 10 more branches." Ava turned, her voice calm but sharp. "At what cost, Daniel? To prove that equality is negotiable?" He hesitated. "You know I am on your side. But sometimes leadership requires compromise." She walked toward him, her tone unwavering. "Leadership requires courage, not convenience. If we compromise our purpose now, we become the very thing we fought to replace." Daniel nodded slowly, understanding. "Then I will back your decision." When he left, Mia exhaled in quiet relief. "That was bold." Ava smiled faintly. "No, that was necessary." The next morning, Ava stood before the press again, this time addressing the nation about corporate ethics in modern America. "The Collins Initiative will not accept any investment that demands we dilute our values," she said firmly. "True progress is not measured in profit margins, but in people's lives changed. If we cannot grow with integrity, then we will grow slower, but we will grow right." The announcement sparked headlines across the country. Some praised her courage, others called her reckless. But the public responded with overwhelming support. Thousands shared her speech with the hashtag #TimesBuildRight*. That afternoon, as she walked through the lobby, a janitor stopped her, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a humble smile. "Dr. Collins," he said softly, "I saw your speech. My daughter watched it too. She told me she wants to work here one day because this place looks fair." Ava smiled warmly, her voice gentle. "Tell her she already belongs here. The world just needs to catch up." The man's eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered. When he walked away, Ava felt the weight of the moment settle in her chest. She turned to Mia and said quietly, "That is why we cannot bend. Every decision we make ripples outward." Mia nodded. "You just changed more than a policy. You changed what leadership looks like." Ava glanced up at the sign glowing above the entrance times, built on truth. "No," she said softly. "We are still building. Truth does not end. It continues, one act of courage at a time." The camera flash from a reporter nearby caught her silhouette in gold light, immortalizing the image of a woman who had rewritten what power could look like. By the end of the year, the Collins Initiative had grown into a national symbol of ethical leadership. Universities invited Ava to speak, government panels sought her advice, and her words were quoted in business schools across the country. Yet despite the public praise, Ava remained grounded in the same purpose that began her journey: justice with dignity. On a cold December morning, she arrived at a community center in Atlanta, where her foundation had funded a new entrepreneurship program for single parents. the smell of fresh paint mixed with coffee and hope. As Ava walked through the entrance, children ran past her, laughter echoing through the halls. Mia followed close behind, holding a clipboard. "Local press will be here in 15 minutes, she said. "They want you to cut the ribbon for the grand opening." Ava nodded but paused by a mural painted on the wall. It showed a group of women and men of every color standing together beneath the words "Times Opportunity is Power." Asterisk. She touched the paint gently, her voice quiet. "This is what I wanted from the beginning, Mia. Not revenge, legacy." Mia smiled. "And you built it." Ava shook her head. "We built it." Everyone who refused to stay silent did. Moments later, the crowd gathered outside. Reporters adjusted their cameras, students waved signs, and local leaders waited in the front row. As Ava stepped up to the podium, a cool breeze swept through the street. "This center is not just a building," she began. "It is a promise that no matter your color, background, or circumstance, your ideas matter." Applause rose from the audience. She continued. "For too long, doors have closed for those who do not fit the image of success. We are here to keep those doors open for good." She cut the red ribbon, and the crowd erupted into cheers. Flashbulbs burst, capturing the smile that came not from triumph but from peace. As people began to disperse, an elderly woman approached her, leaning on a cane. "Miss Collins," she said softly, "I watched what you did last year. My granddaughter showed me the video. You made her believe she could start her own business one day." Ava knelt slightly, taking the woman's hand. "Then tell her to start. The world needs her ideas." The woman smiled with tears in her eyes. "You remind me of my generation's fighters, quiet but unstoppable." Ava squeezed her hand gently. "The quiet ones always are." Later that evening, Ava and Mia returned to the office. The sun dipped low behind the city skyline, casting golden light through the windows. On Ava's desk sat an envelope. It was from Malcolm. Inside was a short, handwritten note. Asterisk, "You won. I finally understand why. I am sorry." Asterisk. Ava read it silently, then placed it back in the envelope. "He is not my enemy anymore," she said softly. "He is just part of the story I had to live to tell this one." Mia watched her carefully. "Are you going to respond?" Ava smiled faintly. "No. Some apologies are better left to time." She turned off the desk lamp and looked out at the city below. "We have more to build tomorrow." Mia nodded. "Always." As they left the office, the sign above the door gleamed softly under the night sky. Asterisk. The Collins Initiative, where truth builds futures. Asterisk. The lights faded, but the mission stayed bright, echoing in the hearts of everyone she had inspired. 1 year later, the Collins Initiative had become a household name. Its programs stretched across the country, touching thousands of lives through education, mentorship, and opportunity. The media called Ava Collins the quiet architect of reform, a woman who had turned personal injustice into systemic change. But inside her office, Ava still began every morning the same way, with a cup of coffee, a prayer of gratitude, and a handwritten note to someone whose life the initiative had helped. That morning, the city outside was wrapped in golden sunlight. Mia entered with her usual calm focus. "Dr. Collins," she said, "the National Leadership Council has confirmed your invitation. They want you to keynote at the annual summit next month." Ava smiled softly. "It is ironic, is it not? I was once the woman they refused to listen to." Mia grinned. "Now they want your blueprint." Ava nodded thoughtfully. "Then I will give it to them, but not as a speech, as a reminder." She looked up from her desk. "Book the flight. And make sure the team here knows the initiative runs on the same principles even when I am away: truth, fairness, and courage." Later that evening, Ava walked through the nearly empty lobby. The portraits on the wall told the story of the organization's evolution: diverse teams, successful graduates, and handwritten pledges from employees. At the center hung a framed photograph from that night at the ballroom a year ago. She stopped and stared at it for a moment. In the image, she stood calm amid chaos, eyes steady as the truth unfolded behind her. Mia joined her quietly. "Do you ever regret how public it all became?" Ava's answer came without hesitation. "No. Silence hides rot. Exposure heals it. Sometimes justice needs witnesses." She turned to Mia with a soft smile. "Besides, the world needed to see that dignity can roar without ever raising its voice." The next week, she traveled to Washington, D.C., where the summit hall overflowed with leaders, journalists, and students. As Ava took the stage, the lights dimmed, and the crowd fell silent. She began without notes. "A year ago, I stood in a room full of power and watched truth rewrite the script," she said, her voice steady and low. "Since then, we have proven that leadership is not about control. It is about accountability. Power should never be inherited. It should be earned through integrity." She paused as cameras flashed. Every organization, every government, every person who holds influence must ask themselves one question: are we building for profit, or are we building for people? The audience listened as if the air itself depended on her words. "True justice," she continued, "does not humiliate. It restores. It does not destroy. It rebuilds. And it begins with those who dare to be honest when dishonesty is easier." When she finished, the audience rose to its feet. The applause was thunderous, but Ava simply bowed her head for a moment, then smiled quietly. Afterward, a young man approached her backstage, clutching a resume. "Dr. Collins," he said nervously, "I grew up in one of the neighborhoods your foundation helped. I just graduated in business ethics. I want to work for you." Ava handed him a card. "You already do," she said gently. "Every time you choose integrity, you are part of this mission." That night, back in her hotel room, Ava looked out at the Capitol lights. She opened her notebook and wrote one final line under her list of daily affirmations. Asterisk, justice does not need an audience. It needs endurance. Asterisk. She closed the book, exhaled, and smiled. The world had changed, but not because she shouted louder. It changed because she refused to be silent when silence was easiest. Outside, the city lights reflected on the window like stars, each one a reminder that truth, once lit, never fades.